Hello and welcome to the Pots and Trowels podcast with me, Martin Fish, joined by Sean
Hello.
and Jill.
Hi.
And we've got all sorts happening today, including a lovely chat with Helen Bainbridge, who is affectionately known as the Queen of Pelargoniums.
And later we'll be answering some of your questions. And if you've got a question for Martin, drop us an email, info@potsandtrowels.com. And if you've got 2 minutes spare, please do drop us a review on the podcast. It just helps the podcast reach more people.
Yeah, and Martin's got some jobs for us to do as well during the rest of the programme, and things to do when you're not having a bath or doing the ironing and not listening to our podcast. But first, let's go up to North Yorkshire and have a chat to Helen.
So Helen, you are affectionately known on the show circuit as the Queen of Pelargoniums because you are an expert in pelargoniums, which is nobody can deny. But you, before you started with pelargoniums, which we are going to talk about in a few minutes' time, you started, I think, on nurseries, didn't you? That's how your career started.
That's right, yes. I started working at Swanland Nurseries, which was my, that's near Hull, which was my pre-college year. And that was a nursery that grew everything. Soft fruit, grew cut flower croissants, bedding plants, pelargoniums, fuchsias, all sorts of house plants, bit of everything really. And it was a really good grounding.
So did you always know that you wanted to go into horticulture when you left school? You know, was it something that you did before you left school?
Yeah, pretty much. My dad was a really good, keen grower, amateur grower, and he encouraged me. And I got my first greenhouse when I was about 7 years old for Christmas, and it held a collection of cacti and succulents, and that's how I started. So I joined the Cacti and Succulent Society when I was about, say, somewhere around about 7 years old, and used to go to the meetings with my dad, and I used to show plants all over the country. Used to enjoy that, going all around the country, different cactus shows every weekend through the summer.
Yeah, so you would probably be one of the youngest members of the Cactus Society, I would have thought. I can't imagine there'd be many under 7 years old.
That's right, yeah, I was. I was the baby of the group.
Yeah. So when you went to college as well, and it wasn't long before you set up your own nursery, which was a pelargonium nursery, Furtreeves Pelargoniums in North Yorkshire. So what made you go into pelargoniums big style?
Right. Well, I had pelargoniums as well from when I was really young. So sort of, again, 8, 9 years old, I had a collection of house plants. And pelargoniums were part of that. People give you them, don't they, as cuttings when you're young, scented ones and things. Mm. And I just, decided I really liked them. I like the colours, the vibrancy of them. And so, I had a small collection of pelargoniums from quite a young age. And then, as I say, when I went to Swanland Nurseries, my pre-college year, that was when I really got into them because they were a pelargonium specialist. Mary Spink had the collection, and I really got into them then and started collecting them big time. And then when I started my nursery, which was a year after leaving college, I had pelargoniums, fuchsias, which are another passion, and streptocarpus, which I love as well. So it was those main 3 groups of plants. And when we did our first show stand, it was a mixture of the 3, which was quite an unusual mix. And then over the time, probably 2-3 years of having the nursery, pelargoniums really took over because they were the plants that were in flower first. So the easiest thing to get ready for a show early on. And they stayed in flower the longest when everything else was sort of going dormant. So pelargoniums really took over.
And although you haven't got the nursery now and you don't exhibit at the shows, you've still got a big involvement at the shows. But when you were at the height of your exhibiting, because you did all the major shows, didn't you? Chelsea, Hampton Court, Tatton, the Harrogate flower shows. I mean, I don't know how many shows you did a year, but you were on the road a lot with your pelargoniums. How many varieties of pelargoniums did you have in your collection? Do you know?
Oh, I think we were up to about 400, between 450 and 500 varieties. Yeah, at the height of it.
And you'd be growing those because you would then be selling those plants when you were at the flower shows.
Yeah, that's right. We used to carry all our own stock plants, and additional, we had the show plants in a separate area. So we had show plants that went from show to show over the years. Each plant would do probably 1 or 2 shows a year, and then be rested, and then go out again the following season. And yeah, we propagated everything ourselves, all in house. Yeah, we had a production of about 30,000 cuttings on a run, and we used to fill the beds up and take them off about 3 times a year. So quite a lot of plants.
So you'd need help with that, because you're away at the shows, and it's a lot of work building a display. Then you're at the show, breaking it down, going home, getting ready for the next one. So you must have had some help at the nursery as well, I take it.
Yeah, we did. We had a really, really good team. The girls were brilliant. We had Ellie, we had Val, and we had Kath. And then my mum, she used to help. And my dad, when he was alive, he would help on the nursery as well. So, yeah, really good team. And then another friend would come in, just helping packing mail order. Betty, she was a real, she's a lovely friend and a character. And we used to have a really good, team, and a good laugh as well. We all used to enjoy working together.
Well, I remember seeing your displays at the shows before you retired from exhibiting. And, we talk of pelargoniums, and you showed them for a couple of times a year, then rest them and bring them out again. But these weren't the normal pelargoniums that people think about in a 6-inch pot. These were huge plants, weren't they? Some of your regal pelargoniums were, I don't know how old they were. They must have been years old, and they were amazing, large specimens.
Yeah, I mean, our plants were up to sort of 20, 22 years old, and we had the nursery 22 years. So I know some of them were 22 years old, because we allocated them as a show plant from the start off, when we first started the nursery. But pelargoniums are basically tender shrubs. They will get woody. They will, they need that woody stem structure to carry all the foliage and the flowers that they're going to produce. So as long as you can keep them frost-free, repot them every year at least, if not more. They're greedy. They're like fresh compost regularly. So if you can keep doing that and keep feeding them liquid feed through the summer and deadheading and cleaning, they will go on year after year and reward you, time and time again with a beautiful show of flower.
And the proof was there, because you were showing plants that were 20 plus years old and getting gold
and
medals.
Huge plants as well, Martin.
Yeah.
They were sort of 5 foot high and 5 foot across. If you remember, we had to clean the flowers on a step ladder before a show.
So, getting ready for a show, there's a lot of work, isn't there? It's not just a case of getting the plants out the greenhouse, taking them to a show and putting them on a table. You would spend hours, probably days, getting them ready and then building the stand.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we used to time the flowers for the show. So 12 days for a single and 14 days for a double flowered pelargonium. All the flowers would be stripped off, all the open flowers. So you walk in the show house, and there was petals and flowers all over the floor while we got them swept up again. But they had to be taken off, because the fresh flowers needed to be timed to perfection so that they would travel. A lot of the flower shows were a long way away from us. Hampton Court, sort of a 250 mile down there to the show. So if they were old flowers, they would drop off in transit. So they all had to be fresh so that they would travel and look good when they got to the show.
Yeah.
So that was a job that needed doing. And then we would clean the leaves as well and do a mock setup at the show. At the nursery before we took them to the show. So that was a 2-day job, and we'd have everything measured and photographed so that when we got to the show, we knew exactly where everything was going to go on the stand.
So an awful lot of preparation work, but it paid off, didn't it? Because you got a tremendous amount of gold medals at all the shows, RHS and other shows as well. Am I right in thinking it was 80 odd RHS gold medals?
Yeah, 87 RHS golds, and we had 6 RHS Best in Shows, and we had some of the annual awards as well, and the Lawrence Medal for the Best Stand of the Year, which was the pinnacle. And then we had others Best in Shows, like at Malvern, Harrogate, those sorts of shows as well, other than RHS.
Yeah, there was amazing displays, there really were. Now, all the different types of pelargoniums, you've grown them all. You've got the centered leaf, you've got the zonals, you've got the fancy leaves, you've got the regals and the angels. if you had to choose one to grow, it's all you could do, grow one type of pelargonium, which would be really difficult for you, I know. But what would it be?
Oh, goodness. Now that depends whether I'm having them outside or inside.
Oh, you can have two then,
Out-
an indoor one and
Okay,
an
so-
outdoor.
Right, indoor one, I would have a regal pelargonium because they're really big and blousy and vibrant, as you know, and they're wonderful, but they don't like the heavy rain on them. So I have those inside. They're great in conservatories, and they're also lovely on windowsills. So regal pelargoniums for inside, outside stellar pelargoniums. They're the ones with the little star-like flowers, and they're brilliant because they constantly flower, and the rain drops through the petals because they're not the really big fluffy blousy flowers. They're quite starry, and the rain falls through the flowers, and they just last so well if the weather is a bit inclement.
Okay, there you go. Some good choices there. So what we'll do, we'll take a little break. Then we're going to find out about your judging, a bit about your garden, and a few top tips for growing pelargoniums at this time of the year.
87 gold medals. 87
It's incredible, isn't it?
Royal Horticultural
Amazing.
Society medals and all sorts of other things. And she said something was the pinnacle. The Lawrence, was it the Lawrence medal? What's that, Martin?
Yes, it was the Lawrence Medal. And what we also ought to add on to that, she's got 87 RHS gold medals. But of course, Helen also used to do other shows like Southport, the Harrogate shows, the Shrewsbury show. So she's probably got as many gold medals again from independent shows. So she's probably, getting on for, 150, 200 gold medals during her time exhibiting.
But she said the Lawrence Medal was the pinnacle of her career. So tell us a bit about that.
Well, the Lawrence Medal is an RHS medal, and it is the top award that an exhibitor can get. And it's awarded annually. And it's based on all the exhibits at all the shows. So, Chelsea, Hampton Court, Tatton, back then it would have been Cardiff as well, and the Westminster shows as well. And it's voted on basically at the end of the year. So there are lots of contenders, and one is selected, and they are awarded the Lawrence Medal. So a very prestigious award indeed. And it's given at the award ceremony, which is usually in spring. So it will be from the show's previous year, a big flash ceremony. In fact, I've been invited to it this year. In fact, I might even pop down and have a look. It's a big thing for the exhibitors. To get the Lawrence Medal is, really, really special.
Wow. I mean, and listening to all that prep that goes into the shows, I mean, I don't think anyone's under any illusions that it's a lot of hard work, but I've got this vision in my head of this massacre of petals in the nursery on the run up to the, just petals everywhere. And so that timing there, she was talking about taking the flowers off so that fresh ones grow in time for the next show. Is that what she was meaning?
Yeah, I mean, it is sort of, really precise to almost to the day they can time them. So it would be if the plants are in full flower in the greenhouse, but they're needed for a show in a fortnight's time, they know exactly when to remove all the flowers at a certain stage so that it gives them time to grow new buds and start to open. So they are perfect when it comes to judging. And she is a master of it. She really is. She perfected it over the years, and she's a very good grower, excellent with the pelargoniums. But she can grow anything, whatever she turns her hand to. She really does it very, very well indeed.
No wonder she's the queen of pelargoniums. Yeah, go ahead, Jill. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think quite a few of our pelargoniums are ones that you've had from Helen, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. I mean, sadly, she's no longer open to the public. The nursery is gone. It's now part of the garden, but she's still got a private collection. So I always know if I want a pelargonium, Helen will root me a cutting, and I know I'm going to get a fantastic plant from her.
Fabulous. And she started out with cacti aged 7. We heard that about
7.
7. I mean,
with her first greenhouse. At
children
7.
often do
I know,
cacti, don't they? When the
Yeah. Well, her dad had a big collection of cacti, a really specialist collection. I never knew her dad, but she's told me about it. And she's still got one of his old greenhouses that she's renovated, a wooden greenhouse the lovely cedarwood one that she renovated a few years ago, which she uses as one of her growing houses. So yes, he was a big influence, and a mum as well in the life of horticulture for her.
Our middle daughter, Harriet, she had a few cacti on her windowsill, but it didn't lead to anything, I'm afraid to say. They just got drier and drier.
We've got one in our bathroom that
they dropped
flowered
on the
quite
floor.
nicely actually recently, which is good. Just a quick side note, if you have a question for Martin, which we'll try and answer on the podcast, it's Pots and Trowels. No, it's not Pots and Trowels. It's info@potsandtrowels.com. Get it right, Sean. So just drop us an email or leave us a comment if you're watching or listening to this on YouTube as a video, if that kind of makes sense somehow. Anyway, we do have a question coming up from, well, we've got a couple of questions coming up from listeners to the podcast. And later on, Martin will be doing some jobs for you as well. Let's go to this first question. Are you ready for a question, Martin? Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, this has come from Barbara. She's in California, from what we can see from the message. She says, thanks for the help and information. Having some problems with my hydrangeas right now. Don't know if they froze or partially froze, or she wonders if they had too much water. She sent us some pictures, and she's hoping you can diagnose what's going on. Some are budding even though they're in bad shape, so she doesn't really know what to do. Should she cut them back and start fresh, or thin them and let some strong ones grow? Basically, she's looking for some advice. You've seen the pictures. What are we looking at, Martin?
Yeah, I mean, I had to sort of Google a little bit because Barbara in one of the messages said, I think they're in zone 9A, and I wasn't familiar with zone 9A, which does get frosty. And you think of California being wall-to-wall sunshine, but obviously parts of it do get quite cold. The photographs basically look, Barbara, like what our hydrangeas would look like at the moment in the UK. They're void of leaves. They look like they've been through a winter with some frost on them, look a bit tatty around the edges and lifeless. But very soon they're going to start bursting into growth. And you've sent some very clear photographs. We can see the old heads that flowered last year. They don't look particularly old plants. There's some weak growth in the base, but you've got some nice strong stems with the old flowers on, and you've done some close-ups as well of the flower buds, so we can see that they are alive and waiting to burst into growth. So I think, depending on your weather, in England we wouldn't normally do it until the weather is starting to get a little bit milder, so I would normally wait in England till March. But if your weather is now, the worst of the weather's gone, you can essentially deadhead them with a sharp pair of secateurs. So you're taking off the old flowers down to a fat pair of buds below, because it's those fat buds just below the old flower that will produce side shoots, and they will be your new flowers for this summer. And then what I would do, where you've got some sort of quite weak growth down at the base, I would prune that quite hard back, and that will encourage a nice flush of strong growth from low down in the plant that probably won't flower this year. It might do, depending on the growing season, but if it doesn't flower this year, that will definitely flower again for you next year. So I think they're fine. There may be a bit of fertiliser around them just to give them a bit of a boost when they grow, but I think they're looking as I would expect them to look at this time of the year.
Super stuff. And we'll have another listener's question in the last part of the show. What else should we be doing in the garden at the minute, Martin, if we haven't got hydrangeas to be looking after?
Well, one of the things we've just done, and it will appear on a video soon, I'm sure, is we've cut the hedge. So if you've got hedges in your garden, deciduous hedges, then give them a tidy up before the spring, because we don't want to be doing any hedge cutting when the birds are nesting. So I like to make my cut-off point for trimming any hedges just that tidy up end of February. So, you've got a couple of weeks left to do it. So just get the trimmer out, your shears or whatever you're using, and tidy them up. And then you've got a good solid hedge that will then make new growth through the spring. So it's quite a therapeutic job to do, I find, and it makes you feel that you're doing something, because there's not a great deal you can do in the garden at this time of the year.
It's not very therapeutic clearing up afterwards, though, because you do the hedge cutting and I have to use the rake afterwards.
Yes.
So is there a top tip for easier
I've got a tip.
up?
I've got a tip. Hang on. What it is Jill, you keep hold of the camera, so you need some more close-ups of the rake. Martin keeps raking. For people who are listening to this, that video's out now, actually. I think Martin's getting mixed up about what week's what, but that video's right. If you want to go over to our YouTube channel and check it out. But anyway, sorry, do you have any tips for clearing them other than kind of trickery?
Well, other than get yourself a Jill. Well, I like to use the we've got various rakes. I've got one that is an expandable rake. You can adjust it so it's narrow and wide. That's good if you're raking out between plants. But where we were raking on the lawn, I've got quite a flexible plastic wide rake with flexible tines, and that makes a really easy job to do it.
It helps if you put a ground sheet down, though, doesn't it? And then you can cut onto that, and then you've just got to lift the ground sheet up. But you never do that.
Well, I do if it's a lot, but I was only just taking off wispy bits. I think we should move on and go back to Helen.
You demoed the ground sheet technique a few years ago, but I've never seen you use it since. So if you dig out one of our old videos, you'll see what Martin putting a tarp down, a wonderful tarp down, and it all looks very neat and tidy. And I've used that technique as a result. But it's sometimes you just go, oh, I just get stuck in.
Time to get back to Helen.
Yeah. So, Helen, you don't exhibit at the shows anymore, but you're at all the flower shows as a judge, as a senior judge with the RHS, and you judge at other shows as well. So how did that happen, that transition from being one of the top exhibitors to becoming one of the top judges?
Well, to start with, it went back to the year 2000, the millennium year. A few exhibitors were asked by the RHS to shadow the judging, to be a designate judge. So we didn't get a vote or a say, we just followed the panels round, and that the ones that did well and were potential judges were taken on. And I was one of the ones that were taken on by Bob Sweet, who was in charge at the RHS running the shows then. And luckily, they liked what they saw when I was judging and took me on. And since then, I've developed and become a senior judge. Now do a lot of moderating at the shows as well, which I love. And I've been judging now for 22 years, I think it is.
Which is a long time to be judging, isn't it, really? I suppose, having been an exhibitor, I was going to say you know all the tricks, but it's not a case about knowing the tricks. You know what makes a good exhibit, don't you? So does that make it easier for you to judge, do you think, knowing how much work goes into creating that display?
Yeah, I think being an exhibitor does give you an insight into what goes into a display and how much work goes into it, and how the mechanics of building an exhibit work as well. Some really simple exhibits are actually very complicated in the way that they have to be built. So that's really interesting. I think it gives me a good insight into how it works to make me a good judge. And I pride myself on being a fair judge. And it doesn't matter who the exhibitor is. A lot of them are my friends, but if they do a good display, they get rewarded. If they don't do a good display, they don't get the reward. So fairness is really, really important.
Yes, and it's got to be. And you mentioned moderating. That's a sort of what it is, part of the judging process. So do you want to just explain briefly what moderating is?
Yeah, moderating, there's normally three moderators at a flower show, and the moderators are there to maintain a level standard throughout the show. So they listen to the results that each panel have proposed, and as long as the moderators agree, absolutely fine. If the moderators give a different medal to the panels, then it's discussed. It's taken to a revote sometimes, and then the outcome of that is either a medal up or a medal down. But there's a lot of discussion goes into it, and it's a really, really fair process so that the whole show is a level playing field and the panels don't judge lighter or harder than each other.
And it is, as you say, very fair, and it means you've got that consistency, doesn't it, from one show to the next, because a gold medal at Chelsea should be the same as a gold medal at Hampton Court and Tatton and the other shows. So it makes sure it's nice and even across there. So you're no longer exhibiting, you're doing your judging. And one of the things when you stopped the nursery, you always say you retired, and you're too young to retire, but you retired from the nursery so you could spend more time doing other things, including developing your garden. Now, you've got a big garden up in North Yorkshire. Part of it, what is the garden now, is where the nursery was, where the old glass houses were. So just describe, your garden. If somebody wanted to know what it's like, how would you describe your garden?
Oh, my garden is a mix of lots of different things. So we have rock rays, we have a pond with koi carp fish in it. We have lawns, we have borders, mixed borders with shrubs as well as herbaceous bulbs, lots of trees. So it's like almost like a mini arboretum. So within the lawn, there's lots of specimen trees. I love conifers. They give you all year round colour. I love the way they change colour as well. The golden ones, they become sort of more orangey in the autumn, and then they become really bright gold in the spring, and they stand out against the blue sky if you get a lovely day in the spring. There's lots of deciduous things, flowering shrubs, a mix of all sorts of things. And since we retired and having a bit more room, we've built raised beds, and we now grow fruit and veg, and especially cut flower, which I love to grow. So with your help, Martin, you've helped me a lot with my veg growing, because my dad was a brilliant veg grower, but I was more into the perennials and the tender plants and didn't really get involved with the veg growing like my dad did. So I had to learn a lot when I started my veg garden, and you were very helpful there.
Thank you.
Thank
yes.
you.
Well, and I must admit, you've got an amazing veg garden, because it's where the glass house was, isn't it? So you've created these raised beds, but you've got part of the framework, and it's all enclosed to keep the birds out and pests out, isn't it, really? So it's like walking in a net structure that is pest free.
Yes, well, I'd love it to be pest free. Things have crept in. I don't know how they get in. We have snails, we have slugs, we have, aphid in there. So it is quite frustrating. Gardening would be so easy if we didn't have all the pests, and the diseases to hamper all the growing. But I do try and keep on top of it. But yeah, the pest thing is a struggle every year.
Yeah, and I've been lots of times. You do grow a lot of veg. You also grow quite a bit of fruit as well, haven't you? You've planted fruit. And outside, sort of the potager area, it is a lot of colour there as well. And you do plant your pelargoniums in beds as well. So it is a really attractive sort of kitchen garden potager that you've created. So on the subject, and how big is it, by the way? Am I right in thinking it's about an acre, your garden?
It is an acre, yeah. The whole thing is an acre. The garden we started about 32 years ago. And the new area where the greenhouses were, it's 10 years old now.
So yeah, no, it's looking really good. It is, as you say, a garden for all seasons, lots of trees and colour all the way through the year. Now, pelargoniums, it's, here we are now, second, third week in February. Not really a pelargonium time, but if anybody's got a few pelargoniums at home that they've overwintered either on a windowsill or in a conservatory that's frost-free, or in a little greenhouse again where it's been kept frost-free, what should people be thinking of doing to get them growing so they get a really good display later on this summer?
Yeah, lots of things you can do. This is the time now where the day length is increasing, so they're starting to put some new growth on. Now, it's still not great light levels, so they will be stretching. The new growth will be elongating. We don't want that, because that would make a floppy plant in the summer when it's got lots of flowers to carry. So what you need to be doing now is pinching out that long elongated growth so that you're taking it back to a shorter, chunkier looking plant. And that pinching out will encourage lots of side shoots. All the side shoots back down the stems will break and produce more stems, more flowers for later on. And repotting now is important. This is the time when they're starting to get going. Repot them into the next size pot up, and that will give them a boost and really get them looking good.
And that's something you always talk about when you're doing demonstrations at shows is, don't go from a small pot to a big pot. It's only just enough to get a little bit of compost around the side, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Little bit at the bottom, little bit round the sides. And you can, if you want to leave the plant, if it's in quite a big pot and you don't want to pot it any bigger, say it's in a 8-9 inch pot, you can take it, this time of year is great, you can take it out of the pot, rake off some of the old compost and put it back in the same pot, but with fresh compost all around the root ball.
Yeah, exactly. And if your plant is one that hasn't been pinched out in the past and it's a bit sort of tall and leggy now, would it do it any harm if you actually got your secateurs and gave it a bit of a trim down, or is that a bit of a dangerous thing to do at this time of the year?
You can do it. I'd wait a few weeks yet, though. Right. There's still a lot of botrytis around in the atmosphere. It's still quite damp. If you've got plants in a greenhouse, if you can ventilate on a sunny, warmish day, then that will really help with the botrytis. The botrytis makes the leaves go mouldy and grey, fluffy looking. Remove any leaves that are starting to go yellow on your plants. Keep them clean at this time of year. But it is a thing that will wane after, once you get into sort of late February, you get less botrytis. And I would probably, if you've got a plant that really needs cutting back, I would probably wait until it starts to warm up a little bit. Mid-March is fine.
Because by then it's just going to want to grow, I suppose, isn't it? So wait until then.
That's right.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
But then you'll have wonderful flowers all year round and you can enter the village show, can't you? So that's the idea. Helen, thank you very much. What we need to do is catch up with you again in the summer when you've got some of your pelargoniums at a show or somewhere, and you can give us a sort of a summer masterclass. In fact, if anybody listening to this wants to see Helen, we did record with you a couple of years ago, and we'll put a link on the show notes where people can see that video. But Helen, thanks for all the tips, and look forward to seeing you at the shows later on in the season.
Thank you, Martin. Yes, looking forward to it.
Helen has got some fabulous specimens in her garden, hasn't she? I know we've been a couple of times. And I love that she likes conifers for just that sort of general backbone of the garden as well. And that reminds me, because you did a podcast at Harlow Carr, didn't you? And talked to Russ about the winter garden. And he's got some favourite conifers there.
Yeah, he has. Well, we also did the video, so you can see the video as well. And one that looks really good at this time of the year is one called Cryptomeria japonica. And it changes, and that's why Russ includes it in the winter garden, because it's green in the summer, but the colder it gets in the water, winter, it goes a lovely sort of deep, almost maroon colour the colder it gets, and then in the spring when it warms up, it grows back to green again. So he calls it the changeable conifer.
That's episode 13 if anyone wants to search it out specifically, or those who've heard it already. By the way, talking to podcasts and other podcasts, it'd be really helpful to us if you've got 2 minutes just to do a review, or just literally just click on whether you think we're worth 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 stars. That'd be amazing.
Was that 5?
5 stars. Just helps us, whatever these algorithms kind of recommend us to other people then, and that just helps us get out a little bit further in the wider podcasting world, I suppose.
It's interesting, going back to Helen, it's interesting that she, although she's given up putting on shows, her garden is almost like a giant show bench, isn't it? Because it's just so artistic. You can tell that she has a real artistic flair, because her garden is just beautiful. And, her veg plot is a picture, and her fruit area is just beautiful, isn't it? I know when I went last time, she'd got some, help me out, Martin, there was some brick plinths, and then she'd got rope in a sort of swag. Yes. But she'd trained, was it ivy that she'd trained along the rope as well? So it was just this, it was so pretty. Yeah. It's really picturesque, she's got whole garden.
Fruit trees in sort of raised beds that are planted beautifully around the base, but she prunes them to a nice decorative shape as well. They're productive, they produce fruit, but yes, she's very much got an eye for detail.
Can I suggest you take the camera along, and maybe we do a pots and trowels, a little peek over that garden?
That would be lovely, yes. Yeah, we could do that in the summer. Definitely. Yeah, I'm ready for a few more geraniums. Pelargoniums. If I say geraniums, I get told off. Pelargoniums, Helen.
Well, tell us the difference. What's the difference?
Well, they are members of the geranium family, but the true geranium is a hardy perennial that we grow in the garden, that we cut down in the winter and it comes back.
Yeah.
So lots of them pinks and blues. And the pelargonium is the tender form. So they come from South Africa. So there's lots of different types, as Helen was telling us, of pelargonium, but they are commonly known as geraniums. And that's what most people know pelargoniums as, geraniums that you put in your containers in the summer. But so they're the same family, but they give them different
names.
Just
one thing at the end there, there was talk, you were discussing botrytis. Have I got that right? I'm just wondering what that is. What is botrytis?
Oh, you don't want that, Sean. Oh, no. It's a fungal disease, which
definitely don't want it.
Manifests on the stems and the leaves of plants. Usually can happen any time, I suppose, but it's more of a problem in the winter. If you've got plants in a glass house or a polytunnel and it's cold and it's damp, and you get the leaves just basically go brown and mouldy and start to rot, or bits of the stem. So it's quite easy to identify when you've got it. And as Helen says, when the weather warms up and we get better air circulation, it becomes less of a problem. But through the winter, that's why we always tend to keep our pelargoniums in a well ventilated space and fairly dry over the winter to avoid botrytis.
Don't crowd them.
No, exactly. Lots of airflow.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we've got time for a question.
Yeah.
We've got another problem with a plant, but this time some daffodils, and this has come from Shirley Wright, and she said, "I've deadheaded my paperwhite daffodils, so presumably last year she's talking about."
No, that paperwhites are the ones that we often plant in pots for Christmas. Those scent, you're not very keen on the scent. They're quite heavily scented. And I've grown them in the past, and you find it a bit sweet.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, she's deadheaded them. She's never had much luck in keeping them around for the following year, and usually ends up buying some new bulbs. So she says, "Is it possible to use them again if I feed them until the foliage dies down?"
Right, okay. So yes, as they will have already flowered. So we've grown them. You buy them, plant them in the autumn. You've got to keep them indoors. They're not a one that you can plant in the garden. They're not frost hardy.
Right.
And you're almost forcing them into early growth, and that can weaken the bulb. So most people just discard them, to be fair, Shirley. But I think if you wanted to keep them for next year, keep them somewhere out of the frost. If you've got a cool greenhouse or a conservatory, deadhead them, keep them watered and feed them. That's the important thing, because it's all about building up the bulb, just like bulbs in the garden, really. Build up that bulb, and then when the foliage has completely died down, just store them in a paper bag or a net bag somewhere nice and cool, and then you can start them off again next autumn, September time. So they might not be as good, but I think you'll still get some flowers.
Fantastic. I have to mention this because we had a message from a listener called Pauline, who listens from the United States of America, in the bath on a Sunday morning. So Pauline, just, past a loofah.
Hi, Pauline.
That's the way to listen to our podcast while bathing. I suppose it's probably easier than doing it in the shower, isn't it? So,
It's a bit noisy. I have tried to listen. No, I'm listen to podcasts in the shower. It doesn't work. Not so well anyway. But no, fantastic. Well, welcome aboard, Pauline. It's great to have you listening, and thanks for sending us a message. It's really nice to hear from people, isn't it? Nice to hear from people who are listening.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
yes. Does it mean our podcasts are bath length? Is that the average length of a bath time? Maybe that's.
Does that mean we need to stop talking? Otherwise, the water's going cold.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, you listen to them when we're doing your ironing.
I do the ironing. Yeah.
Yes.
Feel free to do that as well.
Yes, I will. I'm too busy raking up after hedge cutting.
So
Jo.
other jobs then, Martin?
Other jobs, right? Yes. Well, I'm going to sow some sweet peas in the greenhouse. Too cold to put them out in the garden yet. But if you haven't sown them in the autumn and you want to get some sweet peas going, you can do it basically any time from now right the way through till the end of March, and you will still get a wonderful display. So I usually start with about a 3.5-4 inch part, fill it with compost, so maybe 10 seeds on the surface, and then cover them with just about 1/2 inch of compost, a centimetre or so of compost. They'll go in the greenhouse where it's just kept frost free, and they'll be fine. And the other thing is we've got our potatoes, which we got from King's. We're growing a variety called Swift, and they're going to be started off, we call it chitting, which is a process where you get your seed potatoes that we'll plant in the garden in April. We're going to put them in some trays in a light, cool place, and it will encourage the eyes at the top of the potato to grow, and that process is called chitting, and it just starts them into growth for about 6 weeks, and then when we plant them out, they've got a little bit of a head start. So sweet peas and potatoes in the greenhouse this week.
And if you need any help with those sorts of things, this time last year, almost to the day, we did a sweet pea video, and then a week before this time last year, we did a chitting potatoes video called How to Start Potatoes Growing. So if you want to go and have a bit more detail on exactly how to do that, go and check out that on the YouTube channel. Obviously, send us your questions for next week. If you have the chance to send us an email, info@pots&trowels.com, that'd be amazing, and we'll try and get to those questions.
And we'll be back, of course, next week when I'm going to be chatting to a chap called Mark Vasilevsky, who is a parks manager on the Royal Parks in London.
Oh, fantastic. Brilliant. Well, we'll see you next week. Watch the videos on YouTube or Facebook, follow us on Instagram, Twitter or X, and subscribe to the podcast and never miss a thing. For more information, go to potsandtrowels.com.